A very warm
Right.
welcome to the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show. And today's show is 6'2" Eyes on Blue, which captures the life of an English former professional football player who played in the English First Division, now the Premier League, of course, in the 1970s and 1980s as a central defender. He played for Chelsea, Derby County, Crystal Palace and Queen's Park Rangers, and he made his debut for Chelsea aged just 19 in 1975. After initially leaving QPR for Crystal Palace in 1981, he returned to QPR in March 1982, but was cup-tied for their appearance in the 1982 FA Cup final. Yes, folks, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome on the show Steve Wicks. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Hello, Lord Russell. Nice to see you.
Absolute pleasure having you on the show. It really is. So I'm looking forward to this. I suppose let's start from the beginning, Steve. You started out as a youth player for Chelsea in 1973 through to 1974, but who influenced you in the early days with the dream to become a professional football player?
My dad played for Reading, and my uncle Alan, his brother, played for Reading.
Right.
And I used to go as a kid in to watch my dad play and end up in the dressing room and smelling the all the smells of a football dressing room. I got hooked
Oh, yes.
very, very quickly, and it was my dream. It was my dream to be a professional footballer, but also my favourite club was Chelsea. So my
Good.
dream really come true.
And to play for Chelsea was your dream. I did hear as well and read that Bobby Moore was a bit of an influence to you as well back in the day.
Well, Bobby was my to me the best performance I've ever seen by an England player
Mm.
was 1970 World Cup against Brazil
Oh,
when he had
yes.
the likes of Revelin, Jarzinho, Tostão, Gerson, Pele running at him that day in his position. And I know sometimes defenders don't get the glory they deserve, but I think that was the finest performance I've ever seen in an England shirt. And I think
Do
Pele
you know,
said that as well.
Yeah, he did. And afterwards, they became great friends after that game, didn't they? And of course, that was the game
Yeah.
where Gordon Banks made that remarkable save too. So it was a match full
Oh,
of instances, wasn't it? Really, a
Lord
cracking
Russell,
game.
yeah, I watched that now, and when Pele heads that ball, I still
Oh,
expect it to go in the back of the net. How Gordon
yeah.
saved that, I
Oh,
don't know.
it's a miraculous
For
save. But
years,
you're right about Bobby Moore.
for years
I mean, he's
on,
one
Lord Russell,
player.
yeah, for
Sorry,
years,
Steve.
years on, I was at Scribes, Terry Venables' club that he had in Kensington,
Hmm.
and Bobby walked in, and we
Oh,
sat on the same table, and I was there with my, and I had my career by then, but he walked in and just seeing him and he had this charisma about him.
hmm.
And I said, Bobby, I said, can I ask you one question? He said, I bet I know what that question is. I said, when you were at the bottom of those steps and you were going to get the World Cup,
Oh,
what was going through your mind? What were you thinking? He said,
yes.
you're going to laugh. He said, I looked up and I saw the Queen had white gloves on. He said, I looked at my hands and they were filthy. Now, if you watch Bobby go up to get the World Cup, all he's doing is cleaning his hands, trying to get his hands clean.
Yes,
And I think that epitomised the man.
definitely. Absolute gentleman, really, wasn't he? To be honest.
He was.
Great player, great man, and obviously left us far too early. Great shame. But yeah, what a
Oh, great
player.
shame. Great shame.
Someone for any central defender such as yourself to look at, watch, and dream of being able to play in that same way because he was something else, wasn't he? Top player.
Yeah, he never was left on his backside. He always
No.
tackled standing up. He and he played like he looked absolutely immaculate.
Mm.
Immaculate. Nothing ever flustered him. Never had the greatest of pace, but my God, his brain, he read things unbelievably.
Oh, and his timing
Yeah,
too, wasn't it? It was just incredible.
yeah,
And
incredible.
one of the
And
one player I can remember who could spread the ball from left to right with absolute ease.
well, if you look at the World
Incredible.
Cup, he makes the equalising goal for Jeff Hurst with a
Mm.
great free kick. He hits the free kick against Argentina that Jeff
Yep.
Hurst heads. So his contribution was not only defending brilliantly, but he did other things. His
He
passing was
did.
just
Superb
immaculate.
player, yeah. Well, getting back to yourself, Steve, I mean, what was it like at Chelsea as a youth player? You must have some exciting stories to reveal there, because the club was somewhat interesting, wasn't it, going back in the day?
Well, when I signed, I signed in '71.
Mm,
So Chelsea had just come off the 1970 FA Cup win and the European Cup winners win against Real Madrid.
yes.
The place was buzzing. It was absolutely brilliant. What made it better was our youth team squad was incredible. We
Mm,
had the likes of Ray Lewington, Ray Wilkins, Ray Lewington, Teddy Maybank, Tommy Langley, Clive Walker, and the names went on, and it was great to be part of. And the club at that time was just flying.
mm.
Um, I had a chance to sign for Leeds United. I had a chance to sign for Reading, but there was only one decision I had to make, and that was the one I wanted. That was Chelsea.
Of course. And a Chelsea man you were. I mean, what was the academy set up like at Chelsea back in the 1970s, Steve? And in particular, under the late and great, of course, Ken Sillito, a fantastic player and manager and coach. Was there any pressure to succeed at the time under Ken?
No, I think Ken was one of those very laid back coaches. He let you know he believed in you,
Mm.
but he never put any pressure on you. And I likened Ken as my career progressed to be like my first driving instructor. He taught me the basics. His basics that he taught me were stayed with me all my career. And he played a big part in that. He was at QPR as assistant manager when they signed me.
Mm.
He was very influential on giving references about me, and just the sort of coach that just incredible. You play for, and when we got knocked out of the FA Youth Cup one year, it wasn't about us. It was about we let him down,
Yes.
and that's the sort of relationship we all had with him. He was revered by every Chelsea youth team player,
Mm.
and I mean really revered.
And I can, thinking back, I can remember Ken Schlitter as a right back, for Chelsea and so on, and England, of course. But of course, he's probably one of the best right backs in the country and probably should have gone to the 1970 World Cup, or 66 World Cup, played there as well. But was injured, wasn't he? He couldn't make it. And the
Yeah.
rest is history. But
Well,
real shame
I
for
spoke
him.
with Bobby. Yeah, I spoke to Bobby. He asked me if I'd seen Ken, and I
Yes.
was talking to Bobby, and Bobby thought he was nailed on for the right back position. He was playing
Yes.
so well that he was nailed on, and
That's what I heard as well.
it was very sad because when you saw Ken in training, I've never
Mm.
seen anyone hit a volley like him. Everything was and he was hobbling about, but he was still class. You looked at him and thought, God,
Yeah,
he must have been some player.
exactly.
But I think without doubt, had Ken not had that nasty knee injury, which
Mm.
eventually finished his career, I think he'd have been in that 1966 England team without
I
any
believe you
doubt.
too. Without doubt at all. He was one of the best right backs in the country, wasn't he, for England?
Yeah,
And I
he
think
was.
you're right with Bobby said his name was on the number 2 spot for the World Cup, and
Yeah,
sadly the injury has put an end to that. But
yeah,
that's life, isn't it? It goes on. Where footballers' lives in those days, just one bad injury and you're over, weren't you? Really, can't
yeah.
cruciate
Well,
ligaments.
yeah. You look now and what they do now. When someone has a cruciate ligament,
Mm,
yeah, fine. He'll be back in so many months. In
exactly.
those days, you had a ligament, that was it, finished. You
You're
were out.
over, finished. Absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It happened to me back in the day. I'd done my cruciates, and so I had to stop playing football at an early age. So I know exactly what it's like, and it's a horrible feeling.
yeah,
It sort of makes you feel really sick inside, doesn't it? Because if you've ever been through it, it's an awful thing to have done. But that's life in football.
yeah. And also when you feel, and the thing he used to say was that his knee used to move.
Mm,
When he tried to play, and he joined in the five-a-side many times. But the bottom of his leg wasn't attached to the top of his leg. He would move.
Yeah.
You know. And
Well, that's what happened with mine. I can believe that because my knee used to go up and down and side to side. That was
yeah,
really bad.
yeah. It's the same.
So,
Yeah,
so
it was
yeah,
the same.
the life of a professional football player going back in the day,
Yeah,
tough world. I
yeah.
mean, how did you feel at the time to be offered and to sign, of course, your first professional contract at Chelsea? There's also a nice story as well, I found out, at an Indian restaurant with Eddie McCreadie and your dad. I
Oh,
mean, please tell us how that went, because that was a great story to uncover, I have to
Lord,
say.
but that was the funniest thing of it. My dad had never had an Indian food, never tasted it.
Wow.
And we went to this restaurant. He tried to be all bold and all brave, and he ordered the hottest curry you could ever. Mind you, I've got to tell you, I'll tell you the start of the story was it was my first professional contract. So therefore, I was on when I made my debut for Chelsea, I was on
Mm.
£7.43 a week, with £10
Listen,
going home to my
folks, £7.43 a week going back in the day. Wonderful.
and £10 home to my mum and dad every week. And we're going up in the train, and he says to me, he says, "Listen, don't you accept anything less than £100 a week?" And even I was like, "Oh, God, yeah." So he went, if you don't ask for that, I'm going to go absolutely." He gave me this big lecture, and oh, blimey. Anyway,
Wonderful.
we got up. We got up to London, and he started eating his vindaloo, and I noticed these beads of sweat absolutely pouring off him. He was off the end of his nose. It was so funny.
Mm.
And Eddie McCreadie turned around to me and he said, "Right, Steve, let's get down to business." He says, "What do you want to sign for Chelsea? What do you want to sign? What do you need? Tell me what you want."
Yeah.
So, oh, £100 a week, Ed. He said, "Is that what you want?" So I said, "Yeah," sort of embarrassed. My dad looking at me, I'm looking at my dad. He went, "I don't. I think you're worth £250 a week. And I think you're worth 300 the next year, and 350 the next year, and 400 the next year." And I was a little bit gobsmacked. So the first thing I did was sack my dad as my agent,
Great
because
story.
he was not, and my dad was absolutely not, he couldn't believe, in those days what I was offered. But that was Eddie.
Yes.
Eddie was another one of those people that when he believed in you, he'd back you unbelievably. And he was, at that time, he was important because we used to walk in the dressing room and say, look at us all and go, "My babies. Who loves you, babies?" It was like being with Tate Savalas in Kojak. It was
Brilliant.
like this unbelievable. And he had that way, but he had the best number two he could have ever wished to have had, and that was
Mm.
Ron Sillot,
God
who is
remember him.
very, you don't. He was the glue that kept everything together. He was the one that would, when Ron came up to you and said, "You're brilliant today, son. Well played." God, it meant the world, because he didn't do that often,
No.
but he was so important in that twosome. Very important, and a lovely, lovely man. Lovely man.
Yeah,
Should
you
never be
enjoyed obviously
forgotten.
playing under Eddie McCreadie and Ron Stewart. I mean, they were incredible characters, weren't they? I mean, you signed
Yeah,
for Chelsea as a centre forward too, didn't you? So what was the reason for switching to centre half? And what did the Chelsea coaches see in you at the time? And a great centre half you were too, Steve. I saw you play many times.
yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, I scored goals. I was my first year as an apprentice. I scored 23 goals, I think it was, that season,
Wow.
um, and it went quite well. And then we had an FA Youth Cup tie
Mm.
against West Brom, and our two centre backs got injured. Stevie Perkins did his back, and Stevie was a great player.
Mm.
Steve was, oh, what a good, great player he was. Um, and Johnny Spong got injured as well. So we had no centre backs. So he said to me, "You played centre back before, haven't you?" I said, "Yeah, I have." And we were playing against the two England youth players at the time, and he put me in, and we beat West Brom 2-0.
Wow.
And I never played centre forward again.
And a clean sheet too. That's brilliant, isn't it? Proves the
Yeah,
point.
yeah. As I said, the two West Brom players played for England youth. But I think when you play with your back to play, playing at centre half, it's quite lovely because you can see the game, you can see it's coming onto you. And the one thing I was quite good at was I was quite good in the air, so therefore I won my headers. And as I went through my career, if I won my first couple of headers, my whole game grew in confidence. That was my key. And I enjoyed playing centre back. It got a bit feisty when you played against people like Joe Jordan and Peter Wibb, and you know.
Great players they were too.
Well, I'll tell you something. Both of them would play about 15 games a season because they'd be suspended for most of the time. You know, it was every team had that one physical number 9 that you had to deal with, and I grew up very quickly in that time.
I remember a back page report going on. I think it's Chelsea playing Leeds United at Stamford Bridge, and it was billed as being a half a ton of bone and muscle meets today at Stamford Bridge, with Mickey Droy playing against Joe Jordan. I mean, what a setup that was. I mean, I was actually at the game, actually, to be honest, and that was a really competitive, shall we say, interesting confrontation between Mickey Droy and Joe Jordan. Awesome.
But Joe wasn't that tall.
Sorry, Steve.
Yeah. Well, Joe wasn't that tall. Joe was what, 5'11"?
Yes.
Oh, my God. No,
you're cutting out a bit there, Steve.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, that's better, Steve.
No, Joe was the hardest. What Joe used to do, he used to physically intimidate you and then play, and that's the game. So therefore, all you had to do was keep your mouth shut, accept a couple of elbows in the face, and deal with it. And
deal with it, and get on with it. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing there wasn't, and that's the only thing that I absolutely despise about football today. In my era, if you tried to get a fellow professional player sent off, you got lambasted from all sides.
Absolutely.
Now, all rolling about and making out, I think those snipers in those stadiums, I find it embarrassing sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. To get a fellow professional sent off is absolutely outrageous. You shouldn't be looking to do that in football or any sport, come to that. But today it's just all the rage, isn't it? Which has ruined the game. It really has.
Yeah, standards. I think standards, dare I say, have slipped in terms of just being human beings. I think it's
absolutely
slipped. And
absolutely right.
And Ron Harris, I think he probably play about 3 games a season, Ron, if he was playing today, in terms of how he played.
He'd be permanently barred, I would think, Ronnie Harris, the chopper.
He'd have probably signed by now. He certainly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you say you were good in the air, which you absolutely were. There's no doubt about that. But you weren't so bad on your feet either, were you, Steve? You're quite nimble on your toes. You could play football.
Yeah, well, I tried, and as my career progressed, the one person that made me believe in that side of my game was Terry Venables. Terry Venables said to me, you've got a lovely left foot, believe in it, go for it, and believe in yourself. And Terry was that QPR team that I played in. At the time, you played good football. But I always had a nice left foot, and I wasn't scared of receiving the ball.
No.
In those days, our first look was up, and we played into channels a lot of the time, and I could hit a ball into the channel.
Yeah. You don't see that these days, do you? Channels anymore. There's not a lot of
No.
channel play left and right anymore. That's gone from the game. And that was a beautiful way of playing football. And the
Well,
wing
we
play as well, left and right.
yeah. Well, Lord Russell, the three things that we were taught:
Mm.
control, look
Yeah,
forward, pass,
that's it.
pass as early as possible forward. But now
Yes.
you've got, you know, 20
Sideways.
passes across the back, and
Yeah.
it's at times it can be very boring, very
Mm.
boring.
They did say actually that Ray Wilkins was before his time because he kind of played that sort of football we see today in his day, in a way,
Yeah,
didn't he, Ray Wilkins? It was always sideward passes. He did it at Chelsea, he did it at Manchester United, and of course he did it for England. So people just say he was a little bit before his time, but um, I used to hate it myself. I still do now. I prefer the ball going forward,
yeah,
channels out to the left, out to the right. I've got Gordon Hill on my show in next month, former
yeah.
Manchester United player and England's, 6, 7 caps for England. Oh, what a player he was, on the left side. I mean, he was absolutely incredible. And that typified football in your day, didn't it, really, to be honest?
Yeah. I played with Gordon at Derby and QPR,
Yeah.
and
Great guy.
Gordon was a super player and
He
the
was.
funniest guy you'll ever wish to meet. His Mr. Grimsdale, Norman Wisdom, that he used to
Yeah.
do was he was a real great squad member. He kept everyone
Humour.
laughing. He's a great bloke, Gordon. And but going back to Ray, um, yes, Ray was born before his time. But if you look at and a great mate of mine, Rodney George, has all
Mm,
he owns the rights to all the games that we played in with, and Ray Wilkins' forward passing and putting players through and in was unbelievable at Chelsea. We used to catch so many teams on the counter attack because
mm.
of quality balls that he put through to the likes of Swaney and Jock
Oh,
and everyone. And he was Ray was. I played against Ray. I first played against Ray when I was 15. And I looked at him and I thought, my God, I've never seen a player hit a ball
mm.
off left and right foot like he did and play like he did. He was, a, that's why every club in the country wanted to sign him. He
Yes,
was absolutely superb.
he was. Yeah, he
Um,
was.
and he also had that way about him where he's a leader. He was
Mm.
a leader of men. Everyone looked up to him. But a lot of that respect came through because he was such a good player.
He
I've never seen
was.
like it. And to this day, I've never seen a 15-year-old hit a ball like that.
But also a
Incredible.
gentleman too. He was a very clean player, quality football player. Never went out of his way to harm anybody. But God, he could certainly move that ball around, couldn't he, on the pitch?
Oh,
It was incredible.
he was incredible. And as you said, a lovely, lovely human being.
Mm.
He wouldn't say nasty about anyone.
No, he wouldn't.
Um, a
Exactly.
lovely human being. And this world isn't as good a place as when he was here. That's for
No, it's a worse place now, I think, after Ray
sure.
passing a few years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
And of course, good friends with Luca Vialli as well, who sadly passed as well. So
yeah,
they worked together well, didn't they, in later years at Chelsea?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
two
No, he was
great players, great people.
yeah,
Oh,
very
you did.
extremely, extremely sad time. When
Yeah, it was very
yeah,
sad indeed. You did make your Chelsea competitive first team debut at the tender age, I hasten to add, of 18, against Ipswich Town at Stamford Bridge in March 1975. And how did this come about? And how did you feel running out onto that hallowed Stamford Bridge pitch for your first team debut? Huge excitement, I'm sure, Steve.
well, what
Incredible.
happened? I was training with the reserves at
Mm.
Mitcham, and we got a phone call came through because the first team had done a session earlier in the morning, and Mickey Droy had pulled his hamstring.
Oh, wow.
So I got right. You get yourself over to Stamford Bridge. I was at Mitcham, and I was like, they got me a taxi, went to Stamford Bridge, and I was playing. And I remember I got a real rollicking from my mum because it was my mum's birthday, and it was her 40th birthday.
Right.
And I said to the press, "This is my mum's 40th birthday present." And she gave me a right rollicking because I told the world she was 40,
Oh, I
but
bet. Yes.
but she was Yeah, it was what, and I think that was quite a good thing for me because I didn't have time to think about it. I was
Yeah.
there. I was, I had to put my shirt on and play. And I think
Yes.
sometimes you have that night before when you can't get to sleep and you might have too much time to think about it. But for me, it worked. And at that time, people forget Ipswich were the champions. They'd won
Yes.
the year before, and they had Wymark and Johnson up front, who were very prolific. And we drew 0-0, and I was very pleased with the way I played. Very pleased.
Brilliant. I'm sure the coaches were too, because that really was your career starting, wasn't it, at that point? You became a
Yeah,
regular first team player after that. I
yeah.
mean, we mentioned it earlier, Steve, but some great players in that Chelsea side too, even after relegation to Division Two and the financial problems that Chelsea were having, offset with the building of the new East Stand, of course. Was there any player or players you particularly looked up to, in particular? Because there were some
Um,
great players there, wasn't there?
there was some. Listen, the reason why I signed for Chelsea the second time was Johnny Hollins. Johnny Hollins,
Mm,
I
bless
admire,
him.
and that man was the most incredible, 100% lovely human being who wanted to make people laugh. That's what John did. He was incredible, and that was the reason why I signed for him. But there were people in there. David Hay, I will have forever as playing alongside him in our
Mm,
promotion year. You realise just what a competitor he was and how good he was. And of course, um, the one thing I'm extremely honoured about is to have played in the same team as Pete Bonetti.
mm,
What a lovely man! What a fantastic professional, fantastic goalkeeper,
it was.
but also one of the nicest men you'll ever wish to meet in your life. And it
Oh,
was a great honour to play with those type of players. Um, and and also the likes of. I went to the Chelsea game the other day against Shamrock Rovers, and
mm.
I met Paddy Mulligan.
Oh, God,
And
there's a
Paddy,
great player for Chelsea. It's an old name.
yeah, and Paddy was one of those. There were players that took time to talk to the youth team and how
Mm,
you doing, everything going well, and and there were players that didn't really care. But the likes of John Dempsey, Demps was great. Marvin Hinton, I owed Marvin an awful lot. When I got picked for the reserves, he was the one that nurtured me through. He was a lovely, lovely man. There was a lot of good people in that Chelsea squad, and then you had the superstars in that Chelsea squad.
oh, yes.
You had Ozzy was probably the number one man in that whole setup, really, and he was like a superstar.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and Alan Hudson, what a player he was! You
Oh,
know,
beautiful player. Yes.
a fantastic player. But there's a very fine line between being a professional footballer and being totally dedicated,
Yes.
than being a professional footballer and enjoying all the things that come with it. And I think
Quite
there's a
agree.
lot of Chelsea players that at that time would have said that they got carried away with the other side of football.
Mm. Yeah, it was very party-esque, wasn't it? The likes of Ozzy, Peter Osgood, and Alan Hudson. There's another
You
player,
know,
Charlie Cook, for example.
yeah,
I did hear that Charlie Cook always turned up smelling of alcohol. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But
yeah,
what a fine player Charlie Cook was.
yeah.
Oh,
But when he
God.
came back to Chelsea, you would never meet a more dedicated person in your life. He had totally
Mm.
changed. He'd realised what it had done to him.
Yep.
And he ate the right food. He never drank.
Yep.
It was unbelievable, and really, when he came back, he was a real great professional footballer. Really fantastic.
That's good to hear. That's very good to hear. Steve, it's fantastic. And we've mentioned earlier on about Eddie McCreadie and Ron Sillot, his number two. I mean, please tell us a bit more about Ron, because we talked about Eddie, and indeed how Eddie McCreadie and Ron Stewart complemented each other, because you've got to have a great relationship, haven't you? Like Brian Clough and Peter Taylor. It has to work. How did
Yeah,
that
but
work?
I don't know. I don't know whether it worked. I just think that Mr. Bryan, the chairman of Chelsea,
Hmm.
wanted to have that experience with Eddie to help him through.
Yes.
Um, because Eddie, as great a player as he was, and he was a great player.
Yes, he was.
This was his first job. He
Yeah.
was coming to a club, to give you some idea. We walked into the training ground at Mitcham, and our dressing room was on the left-hand side. The first team dressing room was at the end, and the reserve team dressing room was on the right. We walked in, and we went to our dressing room where we were always in, and there was no kit there. And we said to Norman Meadows, "Where's our kit? You're in the first team dressing room at the end." We went, "What?" So we became the first team.
Yeah.
And and it was unbelievable. And then Brian Mears came in because Chelsea had been relegated that year. And he walked in and he said, "Listen, boys, I don't want to put pressure on you, but we've got 2 years to get back to the first division. Because if we don't, our club that we all love might not exist."
Yeah.
So we're 17, 18 years of age. We find out we're in the first team. We're first team in the first team dressing room.
Yeah.
And then the chairman walks in and says that. Nothing like pressure, eh?
No, that's not pressure at all, is it, Steve? But you can see where he's coming from, though, can't you? Really, because and of course, what happened was that team performed under Eddie McCreadie and got promotion back to the first division.
Well, we had a year of getting used to it all, and it was hard because you can imagine you got a team that averages about 18, 19. What are these seasoned professionals going to do? They're going to try and kick you off the park.
Of course they
and
are.
we were like Notts County, and all they did was just kick us off the park.
Yeah.
So we had a year of learning the hard way.
Yes.
And then the second year, we blew everyone away. We were different class, and the Gary Stanleys, the Ian Brittons, it was a joy to be part of, and
because I remember that well, because that first was it the first season you were talking about? We nearly got relegated to the old third division, didn't we? If I remember that correctly.
No, that was we finished. I think we finished 6th or 7th that year.
I'm thinking about a different year now. Yes.
You're right. I finished 6th or 7th, and then the following year we started off like a train, and we kept going, and we ended up with the most bizarre experience I've ever had in my football career, where Wolves needed a point to get promotion. We needed a point to get promotion. Wolves equalised with 20 minutes to go, and everyone was saying, "We're both up. Don't do anything stupid. Just pass the ball." Because it was bizarre. It was bizarre. Bobby Gould was saying,
"Just need a point each."
yeah, and it was a. But what will always remain in my memory of Chelsea is when we came home that night. You'd have thought we'd won the FA Cup.
Yes.
The roads were absolutely full, and all these people that say Chelsea aren't a big club, they're not. In those days, hold a minute. Chelsea are a huge club, and the support is absolutely incredible. And to come home to that and to see everyone so happy, it was an incredible feeling. And for us, I don't think there's any one of us from my era within that club that would have said nothing other than Brian Mears was the best chairman they ever worked for. He was the most honest. When he said to you, "I'll do this and I'll do that for you," you never had to say to him, "Could I have that in writing, Mr. Brian?" You knew his word was his bond. You knew that. And we wanted to succeed for him. And when we got Chelsea back up, we had a lovely, what was it called? What was the little Barbarella's? We went to Barbarella's and he got it all sorted. And he was so happy. And it was so nice because you could see the strain on him over the last couple of 2 or 3 years. And it was so nice for him to realise we're back.
Brilliant. And that was, of course, in 1977, Steve, wasn't it, when Chelsea won promotion back to the old First Division, and a stunning home game that clinched promotion with a 4-0 win against Hull City. And I think Billy Bremner was in that Hull City side that
It
day,
was.
but couldn't play through injury, I understand.
Yeah,
But
it
it was
was.
pandemonium, wasn't it? With young
It,
supporters running onto the pitch, Eddie McCreadie on the microphone asking supporters to lead the pitch. And what's your more memory of that famous day back in 1977? Because I
well,
was at the game, I was watching it.
yeah, the thing that concerned me was the referee was saying, "I'm going to cancel the game and abandon the game,"
And
and
you
we
would
were
have
four
done too.
up, and we were 4-0 up, and we're saying, "Oh, it's only about 10 minutes to don't cancel the game."
Yeah.
And we were trying to stop the fans from running on, but anyway, we got there in the end, and also there was another game against Sheffield United, the one before. I think we won about
Yes.
4-1 or something, and again, it was because we were playing without pressure. We got
Mm.
promotion, and I think we scored 8 goals in the last 2 games, and played really well, and it showed potential we had.
Yeah, and that season as well, Nottingham Forest went up with Chelsea and Wolves, didn't they? And Nottingham Forest then with Brian Clough and Peter Taylor. Chelsea beat Forest at Stamford Bridge 2-1. And I do remember the game. I was there as well, by the way, Steve. And of course, the following season, Brian Clough and Peter Taylor, Nottingham Forest, won the First Division Championship, the European Cup 2 years on succession. The rest was history. But Chelsea did do them 2-1 at home that season. Wonderful
Yeah,
story.
I'll always remember that game because I made the 2 goals for Steve Finister. I
That's
headed
it.
balls down, and Steve got on the end of both of them.
Mm.
But what I will say, and this is my frustration, and it's real frustration, not on a nasty side, on a passionate side, was that Chelsea team that had gone won promotion.
Mm.
If Chelsea could have invested
Mm.
what Forest invested in their team, they bought Chilton, they brought Francis. If we could have invested in our team and bought two quality players, I think the Chelsea team was better than the Forest team.
That's a
I
good point.
We went up again with very little experience. We were again, the team that basically won promotion, and we can see it now, the difference.
Yes.
But in that year, what did we finish? Ninth or 10th, I think.
Oh, you did well. Did very
Yeah,
well.
yeah. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, that absolutely incredible game against Liverpool in the third round of the FA
Oh, I
Cup.
was just about to bring that up actually, Steve, to as well. That was an incredible game, wasn't it? I mean, because Chelsea have achieved two memorable 4-2 FA Cup wins over Liverpool at Stamford Bridge, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah,
But many supporters will remember that what you're going to say now, the 1997 win, um, which was absolutely incredible, and the highlight of that FA Cup winning year. But many older supporters will go misty-eyed when they go back to further 90 years to January 1978, another year we're going to talk about. To put the 78 game into context, Liverpool went into the game as European champions and league champions. A game you played in, Steve, so please, I mean, yeah, you're going to tell us all about it. We beat the European champions 4-2 in an FA Cup fifth round cup tie at Stamford Bridge.
yeah. Well, what was quite funny is my uncle Phil, who came to every single game I played, and
Mm.
we were on a bit of a run. We'd won 9 of the last 11 games, and
Mm.
one of those we drew. So we lost 1 in 11. But the thing was, Ray was injured, Mickey Droy was injured, and Kenny Swain was injured. And my uncle Phil went to the betting office across the road, and he got 14-1, right? And he put 20 quid on, and he got a bigger bonus than I did when we actually beat them. When we actually beat them, it was like, but it was incredible. It
It
was
was.
the atmosphere was. I
Oh,
don't know how many people officially were there, but there must have been 60,000 people crammed into
I
that
was
train.
crammed. I mean, I was in the East Stand at the time watching that
Yeah.
match, and I do remember Clive Walker had an absolute blinder. Um,
Well, that was the last game Joey Jones played, wasn't it, for Liverpool?
it was,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But what was quite funny, Lord Russell, was the fact that we played them at home 3 weeks later, and Souness and Emin Hughes had uh, columns in Match and Shoot.
Mm.
And they both went along the lines that this will never happen again. It was a complete fluke. There's no way Chelsea will beat us. We're going to show them and we're going to get revenge, basically.
Yes.
And they scored with 11 minutes to go. And we beat them 3-1.
I do remember that.
In the league, we beat them 3-1. And I might have exaggerated. It might have been with 18 minutes to go. But we beat them 3-1. And when I say about if we could have signed the players that Notts Forest has signed or spent the money that Notts Forest, that gives you some idea when we played at our best. The side,
absolutely.
You know, we went to Old Trafford that year, beat Man United 1-0. You know, all the big teams, we were great. It was when we beat Liverpool 4-2, and then we lost at Coventry. And you're thinking,
yeah, that's right.
But when you're a young side, as we're experiencing now, consistency is the hardest thing to try and achieve.
It is. And that's what supporters need to understand. You know, Maresca at the moment's got this young side. He's trying to build a young side, transitional Chelsea side into a great side. They've got potential, but this year's not going to be the year. They probably will win that Conference League, European Conference League. They're the best side in that. There's no doubt. But from a league perspective, it'd be nice to finish in the top 4. But next year will be a lot different, I think.
Well, I think so. I think a lot of people. The only thing I would say, to me, Caicedo has been absolutely the best player.
Yes.
Best Chelsea player of the season. We have a problem at right back. So our strength is Lavia and Caicedo. We all of a sudden play Caicedo at right back.
Yes.
We take him out where he's the main man driving forward. Cole Palmer, great. Between the two of them, they cause teams problems. You know, to play him at right back is such a waste. And if you remember in that game, he was in a position where he hadn't been before and he gave away a penalty. And I just look at it and think to myself, you keep your best players that are playing well and the strength of your team where they're playing well and they're the strength of your team. And deal with the right back situation. God knows we've got enough right backs in this club. But there are signs, but there's a long way to go.
There's a long way to go for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So next year, I look forward to it, see what happens. But of course, getting back to yourself, Steve, in 1978-79, you moved to Derby County for a fee of, I think, 525,000, although some reports suggested it'd be 275, but I think it's 525,000 was the actual figure. Chelsea didn't want you to leave, but financial problems forced the transfer. I mean, what were your thoughts of leaving Chelsea, a club you'd been at as a player all your playing career, from a child all the way through to that time?
Well,
Must be tough.
Because it hurt me an awful lot when I went back as a QPR player. And I can understand. The emotions. But I got absolutely hammered. But I'll tell the story of my move to Derby. Out of the blue, I get a phone call from Mr. Bryan saying to me, Derby had made a bid of £525,000. Tommy Doxey wants to talk to you. So I drive up with my wife up to Derby. We're on the way. And from the moment we got in the car, my thoughts are, I don't want to sign for Derby. There's no way I want to sign for Derby. I get there. We're an hour late because of snow and everything. And Tommy Docherty's probably had a bottle of champagne too. And I had all these questions that I wanted to ask him, you know, about his plans and my first question was, I suppose you're trying to do here at Derby, Doc, what you did at Manchester United. He said, I hope not, Stevie. The physio's wife here is diabolical.
That tells a story. Oh, wonderful.
And I'm looking at my next question thinking, well, I didn't know what to say. But that was Tom. That was Tom.
Yes.
But on the way up, I had a phone call from Terry Neal and I had a phone call from John Lyle. And I thought, I've got to try and delay things a little bit. So I said to Dot, I'm not going to sign tonight. I want to go away. I want to think about it. I want to, really think this one out. He was fine. Never put any pressure. Fine. Went back. Brian Mears called me into Stamford Bridge. I went in and he said to me, "What are you going to do, Steve?" I said, "Well, Chairman, I really don't want to sign for Derby. I didn't want to say I've had ABC on the phone."
Mm.
I went, "Right, Steve, I need for you to speak to Martin Spencer immediately."
Mm.
And he was the administrator for Barclays Bank. And Martin Spencer said to me, "Steve, it's simple. If you don't move, we cannot fulfill our fixtures and we are in big trouble."
Wow.
So I looked at Mr. Bryan, and Mr. Bryan was almost in tears. He was very emotional.
Mm.
And I said to him, "Well, I suppose I better sign then." And I signed for Derby. I walked up the Fulham Road in absolute floods of tears. I was absolutely devastated.
I can imagine.
But I wasn't the only one. Other players had that same scenario. The likes of Stanners, the likes of Kenny Swain, the likes of had that same scenario where they just had to move because things had got so bad. The interest rates had gone through the roof. The loan that they had, and the club was under severe pressure. And the selling of the likes of Ray Wilkins, Gary Stanley, even the likes of Teddy Maybanks and Ray Lewington,
Yes.
It saved the club. It saved the club. If people had said, "No, I don't want to go," and were selfish, I would have been in. I remember one time, Lord Russell, and we were playing Aston Villa away, and the bus driver, we all get on the bus, and the bus driver will not move because he can't move because his boss has said until they pay the bill. So the players who had all the money because in those days they weren't a hole in the wall, we had a whip round and paid for the bus.
Crazy times, isn't it?
You
It's
know,
crazy times.
yeah. But
And not a lot of people know that, do they? I mean, supporters don't know that kind of background to what was going on. So it's great you're talking about it, really.
no, it was the likes Umbro pulled out. So the players had a whip round, and we bought all the balls, and we bought all the kit, and we bought everything. It was like being at Chelsea Football Club and hiding the fact that we were being, we had to do things like a Sunday League club.
Cool.
It was bizarre, but the way the boys thought about the club and what everyone thought about it was our club.
It was indeed. And then you left Derby County in 1979 after one season, I think probably about 14 appearances or something, to join Chelsea's West London neighbours, Queen's Park Rangers, for 2 seasons with 73 appearances. I mean, what was it like to be back at, to do then be at Loftus Road, back in West London, Steve?
Well, I had my nan, who was a big part of my life, had terminal cancer.
Oh dear, sorry, yes.
Yeah, no, she was, and part of moving back to London was I wanted to spend some time with her, and Tommy Dock moved from Derby to QPR, and he wanted to sign me again. And Ken Chiletto was his assistant manager.
Yes.
Played for Ken, and I had great times with Tommy Dock, absolutely great times. So it was a no-brainer for me at that time. And I moved to QPR, and we were very unlucky not to win promotion the first year. And Tom had a bit of a run-in with the chairman there, and it resulted in Terry Venables becoming manager, which was an experience.
I can imagine. Great experience too, I should have thought.
Oh,
Terry Venables. Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, in 1981-82, you also had a brief spell at Crystal Palace, chipping in with 14 appearances. but returned back to Queen's Park Rangers for what then became a 5-year spell through to 1986. This is probably, or arguably, one of your more successful journeys in football, winning the Second Division Championship in 1983, and your appearance, of course, in the League Cup final at Wembley in 1986. So please tell us more about your successful times at Queen's Park Rangers, plus, of course, how did your time at Loftus Road compare to Stamford Bridge? Obviously, big differences.
It was very different. I had Chelsea in my blood. I had a
Yes.
bump when I went to QPR. You know, it wasn't the real thing. The real thing, my real experience of loving a football club and just being totally obsessed with Chelsea.
Yes.
What happened was with the QPR situation, because of circumstance, I met a manager who, in my opinion, is light years ahead of anyone I've ever played with. Terry Venables, just incredible. People used to say QPR play offside. We were doing the high press.
Yeah.
The whole team moved together. We were doing the high press. Now, high press you hear it every day of the week because, you know, Pep did it. So, but the truth is, Terry did that in 1982.
He did indeed.
And he was just so far, and he had these, you know, little sayings. You know, one of his greatest sayings he ever said was about, if I was England manager, I'd always have a midfield player.
Mm.
He said, because he thought Glenn Hoddle, the England team should have been built around Glenn Hoddle, and it was built around Brian Robson.
Mm.
Not to say they couldn't play together. It was just that he felt that if England had been Brazil, Hoddle would have been the one that they would have built the whole team around. So he turned around to me and he said, Steve, you've got to remember, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of midfield players that carry a piano. There's only a very few that play the piano.
Yes. Good
saying. And I just thought, what a fantastic saying. He said, and Glenn Hoddle plays the piano. And he came out with these things that you think, God, he's so right, you know. And he was just, and also he had that thing about him where you'd run through a brick wall for him.
Yes.
He was your mate. We had a laugh and a joke. But the moment you knocked on his door for a 1-to-1, you were nervous. Mm. He had everything about him that was needed. He was brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah, because I remember Terry Fenwick telling me going back that because Terry Fenwick went everywhere where Terry Venables went. They were inseparable as manager, player, coach, weren't they? Those two, and great friends. And Terry spoke very highly, Terry Fenwick, about Terry Venables, and quite rightly so. So hearing this from you as well, Steve, it just cements, doesn't it, what a great man Terry Venables was. And again, a cracking coach and a great manager of players. He could manage players, couldn't he?
Well, I think, you know, sometimes it's not a very nice thing, but when someone dies and you have these tributes that come from, it wasn't just players from QPR and, you know, and Tottenham, and it was England players. Players saying he was the best coach I've ever worked for. David Seaman's the worst. No, David Seaman worked with Arsene Wenger. You know, everyone that had the honour of playing in one of his teams would know exactly what everyone was talking about. The best.
The best,
you know,
absolutely.
Him when he was England manager, and he was in his element. He was in his element to be England manager. That's what his whole.
And of course, in 1996, he nearly brought football home for that infamous semi-final game, which we should have won.
You know, you look at the Holland game.
Yeah,
that's one of the best games played. Honestly,
4-1 England, incredible.
And that was, you could see the way they were playing, having played with Terry. So many things that he put into that system, and they were. And let's be fair about it. In the semi-final, we were far the better side.
Oh, without doubt.
That was the heartbreaking thing. We were far the, you know, the length of Paul Gascoigne's stud, and the width of that post, and the, you know.
Oh, exactly.
Oh.
And the Germans knew that too. They know they got away with that and come away from that semi-final on penalty win, knowing very well that they were lucky.
Yeah.
And of course, went on to win the European trophy.
Yeah.
But would have been us.
Another near England miss.
Another near, very near England miss indeed. We've had a few of those, haven't we? Especially of late, in recent years. Then there was a very big surprise in 1986 when Chelsea offered the asking price to bring you back to Stamford Bridge, which you did for another 2 years until 1988. But the club was in a disarray, Steve. Yet again, it was still in that disarray period. A terrible dressing room, player cliques, and Ken Bates not paying the players bonuses after the Four Members Cup win at Wembley against Manchester City. I mean, please tell us more. You're back into Chelsea again, aren't you? Nothing's
Yeah,
changed.
well, I was. I'd spoken to Harold Wilkinson.
Yes.
I'd spoken to Graham Taylor at Watford, and they wanted to sign me. And then out of the blue, I had a phone call from Jim Gregory telling me that Chelsea had agreed the fee that they were asking. And I couldn't believe it. I was like gobsmacked. But as I said to you previously in this, I wanted to sign for Johnny Hollins. That was Johnny Hollins to me was one of my heroes from my favourite team.
Yes.
I had the pleasure of knowing him at Chelsea, and I absolutely adored the man. I adored what he stood for. And I arrived just after they won the Members' Cup. And I thought, great, they've won a trophy, all right. A lot of people called it the Mickey Mouse Trophy, but they'd won a trophy. They had success together. I walked into a civil war. Honestly, I walked in, coming from a very close club where the players were great friends and great mates and would, die for each other. I came to a club where there were cliques. There was 4 there was 5 there was 3 there. And it was horrible. And I remember my first day training, we went to Bangor. And I'm sat having breakfast, and David Speedy attacked Paul Cannavale with a one-wood and tried to knock his head off. And I'm sat there thinking, what? And what had happened is that Ken Bates had walked into the dressing room before the game and said, I'm giving you a £900 bonus extra on what if you win. And he then reneged on that. So then all the players said to John Hollins, you were there. You know what he said. Why aren't you fighting? Yeah. And that really was, he destroyed John Hollins. He put John in a no-win situation.
Yeah.
He lost players because the players didn't think he was fighting for him. But has anyone tried to fight against Ken Bates?
Well, I don't think I know of anybody that did, or if they did, they certainly didn't win, did they?
No.
He had a way of winning every argument and every business transaction that went his way.
But he destroyed Johnny Hollins. Johnny Hollins, he put him in a position where the players didn't think he was fighting for him, and he should have showed more, but he wasn't. Bates turned around to him and said, no, I'm not paying. What can he do?
And he wouldn't have paid. You could have argued till you're blue in the face, but you would never have paid.
No.
I mean, to be fair, Chelsea won that final against Man City 5-4. What a final at Wembley, honestly. And they went 5-1 up after going 1 down, didn't they? But then almost threw it away in typical Chelsea fashion, letting 3 Man City goals in the last 10 minutes. Yeah. So maybe if that had gone on a bit longer, the Chelsea wouldn't have won. They wouldn't have got their bonus anyway. Who knows? But they did win Chelsea, and Ken Bates should have paid out the bonuses as promised. That's terrible.
Listen, I spoke to you about Brian Mears.
You did.
And I said, if Brian Mears had walked into that dressing room, there would not have been an issue.
No, he'd have paid.
It would have been paid.
It would have been. Yeah. And that's the difference, isn't it?
It certainly was.
What a shame! What a shame! But that was your last real last time as a pro player, really, as such. Your second spurt at Chelsea, but you did have some international experience too, Steve, with 7 appearances for the England youth side in, I think, 1975, and 1 appearance for the England under-21s in 1982. I mean, what do you remember most about playing for England at these levels? Different experience, isn't it?
Well, it's different, and what was great because we actually won the Mini World Cup. I
Mm.
think you'll find I've got 15 youth caps. I think you'll find because
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
but we won the Mini World Cup, and what was great about it, we had Ray Wilkins, Johnny Sparrow, myself, and Tommy Langley. So we had 4 players within that England team that won the Mini World Cup in Switzerland. And it was lovely to obviously to play for England, and you know, when you see that shirt, that to me is the ultimate thing, and it's in a cellophane bag, and you just think, whatever happens, I'm going to take that home. It's mine, and it's the world here. But to be part of an England team with 4 Chelsea players and to win the Mini World Cup was a real honour and a real, you know, special time. And Ray Wilkins scored the winner in the final, which was great. So
Wonderful. It
was a real Chelsea effort. And John Sparrow was someone that is often forgotten, but injury.
Great player, John.
Injury robbed Chelsea of a superb left back.
Yeah, he was a great player.
Yeah.
But that happens to a lot of players through injury, doesn't it? And you know, and that's how it goes. You're either lucky or you're not. Some players get through the whole of their playing career with a few little knocks and bruises, but other great players end up with, you know, injuries that ruin their career, and it's all over. It's a sad situation.
Yeah.
Once you're,
go on.
Sorry, Steve.
Once
your playing days were over, you ventured into the world of football management, starting out at Crawley Town, I think in 1992. You went on to manage Scarborough, of course, Lincoln City, Woodlands Wellington from Singapore, and finally Malaysian side Selangor FA, finishing in 1998. I mean, what was the management side of football like? Any interesting stories? There's certainly a good mixture of clubs there. Oh, you lived out in Malaysia, didn't you? So you lived out in Asia for 2 years.
Yeah, I was also assistant manager at John Gregory.
Your microphone's gone again a bit, Steve, there.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah. I was also assistant manager with John Gregory at Portsmouth.
Yes.
And had a good time with him there. He was a good mate of mine, and we worked well together. Mind you, but I often talk about the Selangor job, which was the funniest job. I got offered the job after being in. I took probably the most unfavoured team to the runner-up position.
Wow.
At the end of the season, and I got offered the job in Selangor, and Selangor, like the Man United of Malaysian football. Their average crowd was 63,000.
Wow.
And the year I took over, we won the triple. We won the league, the cup, and the Malaysia Cup, which is and that was played in front of 108,000 people.
Good heavens! Success.
And it was a real experience, but it was great, and I loved it. But no.
So you are a triple winner then, Steve. Ultimately.
Yeah. And I've got
Fantastic.
a gold. Well, I've got a gold disc, a record gold disc here, which is one of my things from football. I helped write "World in Motion" with New Order.
Yes.
I made the song into a football song because they had the song. Hold it 1 second, Nicky. Would you pass me my gold disc in a minute?
Oh, we're going to see it. Actually, your video's not working, so I'm not sure we will. Your video's gone quiet.
So it was great, and I had other jobs offered in Australia and all different kinds of things. I said, look.
Oh no, I can't see it, Steve, because your video's not working. It's just I just see your face now, and it's not live.
Oh, God.
Might need switching on and off again, but I mean, I'd love to see the gold disc. I really would.
Yeah, so that was a great time. But I miss playing. Playing was my once you sort of you can't do that anymore. You stay into football. I loved it, but only one thing.
So what do you do these days, then, Steve? I know we met up last year for the history of Chelsea Football Club on the pitch and off the
Yeah,
um,
I do
drawing
all
board.
types of, I do all types of things. I'm now writing a book.
Good.
I'm writing a book
Yeah,
about,
Steve told me about that as well, Steve. Yeah,
yeah,
Steve Gator.
like, all the truth, and it's a real insight into the hard times and how we all started at Chelsea. And
Mm.
you know, it's. I think it's a lovely book. I think it's emotional, um, especially now when we're starting to lose a lot of those players. You know,
Yeah, which is sad, isn't it?
oh, it's you know, Ian Britton, John Phillips,
Oh,
David Stride, Peace Bonetti, Ray
yeah,
Wilk. Obviously, yeah, it's heartbreaking. You
it
know,
is.
and so I
Peter
wanted to
Houseman,
do,
of course, Peter Osgood. There's a lot of those. Johnny
yeah,
Hotlins. All
and I wanted to do something that would keep them fresh in the memory, really. And it
good
all
for
started
you.
when Ray died. Honestly, I was like devastated.
Mm.
I'd known him from the age of 14, and I just want to do something where, you know, we hear about the class of '91, the class of this and the class of that, but
Yes.
I think what we achieved and what we did, I thought was unbelievable, and it showed how much the players love the club.
And particularly in the circumstances, all the financial problems and everything
Yeah,
else going on, you've got to say there's some real success at Chelsea, wasn't there, with that, bearing in mind of all the problems at the club.
yeah. And as I said, what was very sad, and when I met Brian Mears after football, was the fact that he's turned around and said, "God, I wish I had the money to have just added two or three players to that team because it
Yes.
was very special." So I think circumstances have been different. I think Chelsea's future would have been, you know, because when you look at Notts Forest winning the league
Mm,
the year before, we took 3 points. We beat them and drew at
that's
Notts
right.
Forest. You know, so that's how good we were, really. And Wolves, we never got beaten by Wolves. We also got promotion. We drew both games against Wolves, and we were 2-0 down against Wolves at one stage in the first game, and we drew 2-2, I think.
Yes. It was
Uh,
3-3 at Chelsea, wasn't it? I think it was
yeah,
Stamford Bridge was 3-3.
yeah.
And do
So
remember that match.
you know, so it was just sad. The team was right. The time wasn't. Um,
Yeah.
but I look back and you look at and people say about there's groups of youth players that come through teams at certain times, and I think that our one is very underrated because, as I said to you, when I said to you what Mr. Brown said, we've got 2 years to get up.
Mm,
Otherwise, this club won't exist. It gives you
yeah. Terrible.
pressure. We were under.
I remember speaking to Glenn Hoddle last year as well, actually, for the history of the Spurs book, similar to
Yeah,
Chelsea book. And he said that when he turned up at Chelsea as manager going back, 90s, he said it wasn't run like a football club.
no,
So immediately he looked at it and thought, this is not being run as a football club. So he could see it straight away, going
yeah.
back in those days.
Well, you know, with all due respect to everyone,
Mm,
who's you know, and there's a lot of people that everyone raves about, and they're brilliant, and they're this and they're that. And there's one that particularly sticks out that wasn't
yes.
that Chelsea because um, until you work with him, you realise just how self he was, and it wasn't about the club at all. It was
No.
about and when a manager got above him in terms of popularity,
Mm.
9 times out of 10, that manager would have been sacked.
Oh, that's terrible.
You know,
Yeah.
and I don't, you know, as I said, and it wasn't a football club. It wasn't a football
No.
club. You know, the training ground was always there was no money spent on the training ground. There was no money spent on making. It was all about the front end.
Mm.
Club, you get what you reap what you sow, don't you? In
Yeah,
terms of
absolutely.
what you build. Yeah, so it was very frustrating, but wouldn't change it for the world.
Of course not. And the great memories you've got, and we're over the hour now, Steve, on the show. So we've had a great discussion. So as always, on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show. We could talk forever, Steve, about your life and an amazing life too in professional football.
No,
And I know we're meeting up on the 25th down in the West End in London, Fulham Road. So we've got another Chelsea book discussion going on down there, haven't we? Another event. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there as well.
I look forward to seeing you, Lord Russell, and it's been lovely.
Absolutely.
I hope I haven't bored you.
No, you haven't bored me. It's been some great stories, and it's been a huge pleasure, as always. And as always, the pleasure's all mine, and of course the show's audience, when this podcast is released on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show and the Lord Russell Baker YouTube channel. So thank you, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you Steve Wicks. A big round of applause, Steve. Fantastic. So do you mind just staying on for a few minutes after I wrap up? Just have a quick chat.
No problem.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. The next episode on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show is the Chelsea iconic midfield ball winner, where my special guest will be nothing else than John Boyle, or Boilers, who is a Scottish former footballer who played during the 1960s and 1970s. Born in Motherwell, John Boyle signed for Chelsea as a 15-year-old whilst on holiday, unbelievably, in London. John Boyle was an important member of the successful Chelsea side of that period, usually playing in the midfield ball winner role. John Boyle made his Chelsea debut in a League Cup semi-final against Aston Villa and ultimately picked up a winner's medal in that competition the same year after playing in Chelsea's two-legged final victory over Leicester City. John Boyle played in Chelsea's FA Cup final loss to Tottenham Hotspur 2 years later, but missed out due to injury when Chelsea won the FA Cup in 1970, beating Leeds United in that famous replay at Old Trafford. John Boyle made amends the following season, playing in both matches for Chelsea's successful European Cup Winners' Cup final win against Real Madrid in Athens. So another exciting show to look forward to on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show, available of course on all podcast media platforms and the Lord Russell Baker YouTube channel. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the inside. So until then, it's au revoir from him and au revoir from me.